speaking, Alexander already indicated at the beginning of the year in the state event in open research seminar at the Bank of Finland. And today, I hope we will enjoy his presentation here. So please, Alexander,
Thank you, Sergey. Thank you very much to everyone for attending this seminar today. I'm going to talk about non-linearity in exchange rate pass-through to domestic prices in Ukraine, and the traditional disclaimer is that the views in this research are only mine, and they do not necessarily represent the official position of the National Bank of Ukraine, so you should notice this disclaimer down there. Okay, let me first start with the motivation and with introduction to this research. And the traditional definition of the exchange rate pass-through is the percentage change in the price of imported good in local currency, resulting from 1% change in the nominal exchange rate. However, the importance of the exchange rate pass-through to the monetary policy extended the focus of this interest and of the research to study and examine the pass-through effect not only to import prices but also to other price indices, namely consumer prices and other domestic price indices. For Ukraine, this topic is very relevant, and I highlighted several very hot issues that make exchange rate pass-through for Ukraine very important. First of all, Ukraine is a small open economy, and we know all that small open economies are usually affected by external shocks and by exchange rate shocks also. During last years, within the transition to inflation targeting, Ukraine has adopted a floating exchange rate regime, which implies that exchange rate becomes more volatile, and the exchange rate shocks, whether they are small or large or frequent, they appear much frequently than in the case of fixed exchange rate regime. In addition, due to uncertainties, different financial uncertainties and uncertainties due to the military conflict, which actually have a huge impact on exchange rate in Ukraine, which also aggravates the problem here in Ukraine. So drawing on existing studies on exchange rate pass-through for Ukraine, we find that the literature is really scarce, and that we find only a few comprehensive studies that provide empirical estimates for ERPT for Ukraine. Most of them, they are study or examine exchange rate pass-through from US dollar exchange rate or euro exchange rate, and authors find that the coefficient is really high for Ukraine comparing to other countries. Also in our previous research, which is the last one in this table, which was presented actually during the NBU conference in May, we also estimated the exchange rate pass-through from ruble and also from nominal effective exchange rate. Today we are going to talk about another issue in exchange rate pass-through mechanism, non-linearities or asymmetries with respect to direction and magnitude, namely whether exchange rate pass-through is different when exchange rate appreciates or depreciates, or whether the changes are small or large. So let me proceed with the agenda for today. First, we will proceed with brief literature survey, then we will highlight the analytical framework that we use in our analysis, then we will talk about estimation approach and data description, and then we will turn on to estimation results and also find some key messages that we can learn from this presentation today. So drawing on existing studies on ERPT asymmetry with respect to direction of exchange rate movements, namely depreciation or appreciation. Most of them use micro-founded pricing to market theory, which implies that there is a foreign exporting firm, and it has some markup over its marginal cost, and following depreciation or appreciation, the markup responsiveness may be different. In instance, appreciation has a positive effect on foreign exporters' markup, and depreciation has a negative effect. You can just imagine when exchange rate appreciates or decreases, yes, then if everything else is fixed, then the markup should rise, which is positive for foreign firms' profit. In case of depreciation, the foreign firm has to decrease its markup in order to keep prices constant. Thus, appreciation is more, absorption of exchange rate shocks after appreciations are much more desirable for foreign exporting firms than in the case of depreciation. However, the literature defines two different structures of the market. One in the perfect competition, when foreign firm actually cares about its market share. Then after appreciation, in order to maintain or even gain a market share, they will not change its markup, but they will change the price and decrease price in order to make their goods more desirable for consumers, and thus it means that we'll have high exchange rate pass-through. In the case of depreciation, also in order to hold on the market share, foreign firm will not change the price, which means the low exchange rate pass-through. However, in the climate of imperfect competition, when foreign firms have actually substantial power on the importing country's market, they don't have incentive to absorb exchange rate shocks, and in the case of appreciation, they will not change their markup, and they will actually, in fact, the markup will actually rise, and they can gain more profit from that, which means low exchange rate pass-through. In the case of depreciation, they don't have incentive to hold on the market share because of the imperfect competition and the monopolistic environment, and they will not change their markup, but they will change price, they will increase price, and reflect exchange rate changes in their prices fully. So this is the main points that you can find in existing studies, theoretical literature on exchange rate pass-through and its asymmetry with respect to depreciation and appreciation. Let's turn to the nonlinearities in the pass-through mechanism from small and large exchange rate changes. In this case, usually existing studies, they talk about menu cost, which is the price, which is the cost that appear if the invoice price actually changes. So assume that there is some contract, and if between importer and exporter, and if you change the price of the contract, you must pay some fee, for example, yes? So in this case, in order to avoid menu cost, foreign firm will not react, or it will absorb exchange rate shocks from small exchange rate changes. And if the exchange rate changes are large, then in order to react on demand condition on the destination country and maintain its market share, they will change their invoice price. However, in this case, the price-setting behavior of foreign firm matters. For example, whether there is a producer currency pricing strategy or local currency pricing strategy. Let's go back to producer currency pricing. So in this case, the invoice price is the foreign exporter's currency. Namely, in the case of Ukraine, for example, you can assume that the contract is in US dollars, for example, yes? And in this case, following the small changes of exchange rate, when the invoice price is not changing, that means that prices in local currency will fully reflect exchange rate movements, which is high exchange rate pass-through. In contrast, after large exchange rate changes, invoice price is changing, which means that the prices in local currency doesn't respond to exchange rate movements. So in this case, if foreign firms follow producer currency pricing strategy, we have the result is high exchange rate pass-through from small changes and low ERPT from large changes. However, if the invoice price is importer's currency or local currency, then we have different result, just inverted result. Then small changes will be not reflected in the prices in local currency. However, large exchange rate changes will be fully reflected, which is high exchange rate pass-through. Frankly speaking, in empirical analysis following 4 different pricing strategies requires a highly disaggregated and informative data set, which means that we have to know what prices and what actually goods are traded in foreign currency or in local currency. And usually this data is not available for example, in Ukraine. However, we can assume that in Ukraine, most foreign firms, they follow producer currency pricing strategy. Yes, most of contracts, they're usually in exporter's currency. Thus, we can expect that from theoretical point of view, that small changes will actually have much higher exchange rate pass-through than large exchange rate changes. So this is kind of our assumptions from a theoretical point of view. Okay, so these were 2 different views on asymmetries and non-linearities of exchange rate pass-through in existing studies. And in our analysis, we decided to follow micro-founded pricing to market theory or approach and follow the simple approach when we consider a single foreign exporting firm which has a profit maximization problem. You can see this simple equation there where they have profit, which is price in local currency multiplied by quantity demanded divided by exchange rate minus some cost function, which also depends on the quantity demanded. If we take derivative with respect to quantity demanded, we will have a simple equation where we see that prices in home currency and local currency equals to exchange rate multiplied by some markup and multiplied by marginal cost of exporting firm. This equation is widely used in international macroeconomics, and this markup from this equation is assumed to depend on the demand condition. Actually, when we take the derivative and solve the maximization problem, we find that markup depends on the demand, on the price elasticity for demand of important product. However, in our analysis, we also test the hypothesis that this markup actually responds non-linearly to different exchange rate fluctuations, namely to different direction of exchange rate movements or magnitude of exchange rate changes. So in this case, we also add some transition functions, which is gamma d, yes? Our markup equation now depends not only on demand conditions on importing country, but also depends on these transition functions. And if we take a simple log linear reduced form from the previous equation, the price equation, now we get that prices in local currency, in logs, will be equal to, well, you have equation on your screen. And from this equation, we find that the exchange rate coefficient, which is usually used to determine exchange rate pass-through, we have 2 coefficients, this beta and this transition functions gamma d. This equation is usually widely used in empirical studies in order to test for different nonlinearities, not only to direction and magnitude of exchange rate changes, but also to different business cycles, inflation environment, and so on. In our case, this transition function reflects the percentage change of exchange rate, and this helps us to actually capture the differences between price reaction due to small and large exchange rate changes or appreciations and depreciations. So the joint coefficient from this theoretical equation is now equals to beta plus these transition functions. And we can assume that there are 2 conditions that have these transition functions. It equals to 0 if exchange rate changes, or D as we call it, is higher than some threshold value, or its phi in all other cases. So now we can find 2 different coefficients of the pass-through effect. First one, which equals just B, and in the second one, B plus phi. In our analysis, this threshold value that we use for in the theoretical model is simply equals to 0 if we talk about cases of appreciation and depreciation. And we also have to find some some other threshold value which divide extreme cases into regimes of small and large exchange rate changes. I will talk about this threshold value a little bit later. So let me now proceed to other components that we should add to our theoretical inflation in order to make it more, to be able to test the pass-through effect to consumer prices. As I already mentioned, this pricing to market theory and that we use for our analysis, it is usually used to estimate exchange rate pass-through to import prices, which means that some good is imported from abroad. However, in our analysis, we talk about consumer prices, which is actually prices that you can find in the supermarkets. In empirical studies, usually prices and exchange rates follow non-stationary processes, and which requires differentiation. And it gives differentiation actually gives the results in inflation equation. Yes, if we take first difference of some variable and logarithm, we will take a percentage change, which in our case is inflation. We also follow a common practice and include inflation persistence in order to account for adaptive expectations to match Phillips curve. In addition, we include also lagged values of all other independent variables to account for relationship in dynamics. Including and considering all these ideas, the theoretical equation from microfounded markup approach and our three main points to make it suitable for consumer prices, we have our final theoretical equation where change in the price level, inflation, will equal to its persistence and to lags of all other independent variables, namely to exchange rate, to marginal costs, and to demand conditions in the importing country. Let me move to the estimation approach that we use for this analysis. So we used a simple autoregressive distributed log model. As you can see from the equation, it really looks very similar than theoretical equation that we derived a few seconds ago. And here we have this autoregressive distributed log model is a simple regression which includes persistence of the dependent variable and also lags of independent variable. In order to capture the non-linearities and to actually estimate different coefficients of the effect of dependent variable on the independent variable, we add two different dummy variables which reflect high and low regime. The first dummy variable will reflect will equal to 0 if our independent variable has some conditions, mod is higher than gamma, and otherwise it's 0. And another variable is just inverted. Yes, when d plus is 1, d minus will be 0, and vice versa. So this estimation approach in our econometric setup will actually repeats the theoretical assumptions that we use in previous slides. And the interpretation of this coefficient that we have in our econometric equation, if all variables are in logarithms and in first differences, then it's simply the percentage change of dependent variable resulting from 1% change of each regressor. So when we have coefficient, any coefficient A2, yes, from this equation, that means that 1% change in dependent variable in independent variable will result to some percentage change of the dependent variable. Okay. However, in order to measure full dynamic effect of the change of the independent variable, we first calculate the log coefficients considering inflation persistence and exchange rate persistence, and then we compute the cumulative coefficient, which will give us the dynamic multiplier of exchange rate pass-through. So this is nothing new. This is commonly used in empirical studies for other countries, so we kind of repeat this procedure for the case of Ukraine. So let's move to the data we use in the analysis. We use monthly data from January 2007 until the April 2016. We use 258 disaggregated consumer price indices, and we also group them to different price groups. The first one includes all prices. The second one includes just prices which are actually core consumer prices, yes, or core consumer price index. Then we also study exchange rate pass-through to raw food prices, core food prices, core non-food, or in other words, core narrow prices, and also prices of tradables and prices of import tradables. The main idea of this division is to capture some differences in price reaction of different groups. For example, all consumer prices, they include administratively regulated prices, prices of fuel prices, and raw food prices. And then kind of studying exchange rate pass-through to different groups will give us any idea of the peculiarities of some price indices. So to capture for control variables in our analysis, we take exchange rate, which is nominal effective exchange rate. Actually, the positive change of the NIR is depreciation and the negative is appreciation, yes? We take nominal effective exchange rate just because of one criteria. It's more volatile than US dollar exchange rate. This helps us actually to capture these periods of appreciation and depreciation and small and large changes. In case of US dollar exchange rate, this will be not very easy because of the exchange rate peg during the long period time. So to measure demand conditions of importing country of Ukraine, we use industrial production index, which is available on the monthly basis, and we take a difference between seasonally adjusted EPI and HP filtered EPI in logarithms in order to have this EPI gap. Yes. In order to capture supply conditions in our inflation equation, we take fuel price index, which is taken from IMF commodity price statistics, and include Brent oil prices, natural gas, and coal prices. Usually in empirical literature, authors just use oil prices. However, the peculiarities of our economy, we have to also consider some other supply shocks that can be faced by Ukraine. So including natural gas and coal prices will actually help us to capture these effects. Okay, so this is all price indices. And other control variables that we use in our inflation equation. And now we can move to results, and we can see the first step of our estimation is the estimation of linear model in order to make a kind of a benchmark estimates in order to compare with some nonlinear estimates. So we estimate this equation, the upper equation. We use just the simple general to specific approach and archaic creation in order to determine the number of lags to include in the equation. And the results are following. We find that prices, disaggregated prices, yes, respond to nominal effective. I really want to highlight that this is nominal effective exchange rate, not US dollar exchange rates, and we will a little bit later talk about US dollar exchange rate, but now we talk about nominal effective exchange rate. So we find that the pass-through effect, the full dynamic multiplier, exchange rate pass-through multiplier, it varies from 0.15 to 0.27 in the case of core food prices. So it's pretty much close to existing studies for Ukraine, and it's very high comparing to other countries. For example, in developed economies, this coefficient may be 0.05 and lower. So in this case, this is pretty much high. So all coefficients are statistically significant, and the only what I can mention here is the reaction of raw food prices. They are very sensitive in the short run, but in the long run they stabilize on the average level. Okay, so this is the benchmark results we have from linear model estimation. Then we can move to estimation of nonlinear components. In order to measure these nonlinearities, we should talk about this transition variable that we actually discussed previously, and also about threshold value. So the transition variable usually in empirical studies is assumed to be the exchange rate variable that is used in the inflation equation, in the econometric estimation equation. However, one would argue that this transition may not be instant. Yes, it requires some longer period of time in order to shift from one regime to another regime. That's why also some authors use other approaches to determine this threshold, this transition variable. In our case, we take 3 months nominal effective exchange rate change, which is 1 quarter exchange rate, nominal effective exchange rate change, in order to capture all lags in our inflation equation. So we use nominal effective 1 quarter change of the year. When we talk about threshold value, this is another problem because the choice of threshold value may give us different results. In the case of direction of exchange rate movements, it's simple. We talk about positive and negative change, which positive change is depreciation, negative change is appreciation. However, in order to determine small and large changes, we have to make additional assumptions. The first assumption we make is we find the median of absolute values of new change, which divides our time series of exchange rate to equal time sets, to equal periods. Yes, so this helps us actually to avoid any estimation problems. Yes, but this does not have any I don't know, theoretical arguments on the choice of this threshold value. Nevertheless, the threshold value equals to 3%, and we can say we assume that small changes are the changes of nominal effective exchange rate, which is lower than 3%, and large changes which are higher than 3%. However, we also test the threshold value, which equals to 2 standard deviations, in order to capture this extreme depreciation that we actually experienced during our time span. This is actually on graph 3. You can see that everything that is higher the green line will be captured by taking 2 standard deviations at the threshold value. So this helps us to measure exchange rate pass-through in 2008 and in 2014 and 2015, which is very interesting in terms of Ukrainian monetary policy. Although the fraction of observations that actually reflect these extremely large exchange rate changes are very small. It's only about 9%. However, we use disaggregated data and to 258 indices, and it gives us the ability to avoid all the estimation problems with short data, with small number of observations. And the fourth assumption, we use both 3% and 16% in order to measure small, large, and also medium changes. So probably there are more than one threshold value for our analysis. Okay, so this is 4 main assumptions that we use in our estimation analysis. And then now we can move to asymmetries in exchange rate pass-through from depreciation and appreciation. So in the table, you can see numbers which actually reflect exchange rate pass-through coefficients, and in the square brackets you can see standard errors and the sharps there indicate significance level. So 3 sharps is significance level to reject the hypothesis of linearity. So we test the hypothesis that the coefficient from depreciation is equal to coefficient from appreciation. So you can see that in most cases, except of core food prices, these coefficients, the linearity hypothesis can be strongly rejected. Only in core food prices we cannot reject the linearity hypothesis, meaning that we cannot find any asymmetries there. Okay, so we can see from the results that in most cases the depreciation has much higher effect on prices than in the case of appreciation. Only for the raw food prices, this direction of asymmetry is different. So appreciation is much more, has much more effect on prices than in the case of depreciation. And this actually shows us that that estimating the ERPT to consumer prices may give us biased results, because the huge fraction of the raw food prices that actually are included in consumer prices, they have different nature or different direction of this asymmetry. So, however, we can make a conclusion that for core consumer prices, for core narrow prices, prices of tradables and prices of import tradables, depreciation has much higher effect than appreciation. So this is our results for asymmetries with respect to the direction of exchange rate movements. Then we can turn to nonlinearities from small and large exchange rate changes, and here you can see results from when we take threshold value which is equal to 3% and threshold value that is equal to 16%. And the interesting point here that running the estimation results of these two models, two alternative models, it gives us different results, because when we take threshold value of 3%, we find that small exchange rate changes are much higher effect on prices than in the case of large changes. However, if we estimate the same model with the same number of flags and everything, but take threshold value as 16%, the results change, and we can see that large changes or extremely large changes has much higher effect. So the first idea that you can take from these results is that there are probably more than one threshold value. That's actually why we take, in the alternative next model, we take 2 threshold value for our analysis. So we run the model with 2 threshold values when we define small changes, which is lower than 3%, medium changes, which is between 3 and 16%, and extremely large changes. And we receive results that say that prices in Ukraine, most prices, they respond to, they are very sensitive to small and to extremely large exchange rate changes in most cases. And medium exchange rate changes are insignificant in all price groups. So if we talk about theoretical interpretation of these results, we can say that following the theoretical arguments that I actually described you in the beginning of this presentation, the sensitivity to small exchange rate shocks, is in line with the theory that foreign exporters have this smart menu cost. Yeah, so the change of invoice price is actually costly. That's why very small exchange rate changes, they will not be reflected, they will be reflected in the prices in local currency. However, there is also some studies, very good studies, that explain that in times of crisis and financial or other types of uncertainties, large exchange rate changes may be may have much higher effect on prices than in other cases. So this actually is also in line with our results, because the extremely large new changes that we got in our data, they reflect the crisis periods. And and we receive and our results state that the exchange rate pass-through increases when exchange rate changes are extremely large. So this is the graphical representation of our results. We can see that in all cases, medium exchange rate changes are insignificant. It's about 0. And in large and medium changes are equal in all cases except of raw food prices. Yes, where raw food prices are much more sensitive to small exchange rate changes. However, they also, we can actually, this actually indicates that in the case of raw food prices, the competition structure of markets where raw food prices are actually traded much better than in other cases. However, there are probably some other effects that we don't mention in our analysis, for example, yielding capacity and others, so we're not making any conclusions on that. But however, as we see in all cases, we can strongly reject the hypothesis that medium changes have some effect on prices in Ukraine. Okay, to sum up, or to talk about key messages from this research, we can say that in Ukraine, the adoption of inflation targeting within flexible exchange rate may be problematic when risks associated with exchange rate volatility remain high. And this is a highly debated topic now against or the flexibility of exchange rate. However, the National Bank is able to attain its inflation targets if it understands this exchange rate pass-through mechanism from exchange rate changes to inflation. And in our research, we find that for most price groups, the pass-through effect from depreciation is higher than from appreciation. And following theoretical arguments, we can find that this indicates a weak competition structure for Ukrainian markets. In addition, we find that small changes have a considerable effect on price adjustment in Ukraine, which indicates that there are some menu costs for foreign producers, and that pass-through effect rises in case of extremely large exchange rate depreciations under the crisis conditions. So National Bank should be aware of these results, because while attending its inflation targets, National Bank should be aware that the pass-through effect from moderate changes are insignificant for prices. There are also other sources of nonlinearities that can be found in the exchange rate pass-through mechanism, for example, inflation environment, business cycles, or exchange rate volatility. We don't take it into account in this research, on this step, but I hope that it will be a subject of further research. So thank you very much for your attention. I hope you have some questions for me, and we can start a fruitful discussion of this topic. Thank you.
Confirmation for the monetary policy done by the National Bank of Ukraine in a way to keep the changes in FX rates, particularly to US dollars, on a minor level. Do you see your results confirming this policy in a positive way, even if effects of depreciations of the currency, hryvnia, do have a stronger impact, positive or maybe negative, on inflation? So would you go so far to say that?
Well, what I can actually say is that the monetary policy that is now being conducted by the National Bank of Ukraine can be actually characterized by these moderate changes of exchange rate. And following our results, that we can say that this is good because it has no effect on prices. The idea is that we have to avoid extremely large exchange rate changes. That is definitely what we can say from our results. The fact that the small changes are also very significant in Ukraine, this is nothing new in the world. Yes, in most open economies, that when foreign producers follow these producer currency pricing strategies, they will have high exchange rate pass-through from small changes, yes? But these changes are small, and the effect would be small in absolute values, yes? So we cannot avoid it because of the structure of the trade between different countries. But what can we say? That the National Bank, first of all, should avoid the large exchange rate changes which actually have high effect on prices. So I hope I answered your questions. Yeah.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for interesting presentation, which I find extremely useful. I have 3 questions, comments.
Okay.
So you may wish, I may go one by one, however you want. First is actually a comment. If I'm not a specialist in this area, so I may be wrong, but if I saw well when you used other studies, all 3 studies, if I'm not mistaken, from the past, from other literature, yeah, were actually 2012, 2013, basically not taking into account the huge change in the exchange rate regime. Okay, so the only study basically that accounts this change, and I'm referring now to the US dollar first, which was, as we know, a long time 5, then 8,
yeah.
Then is yours.
Yeah.
So my question is, do you think that this qualitative change affects their results? So that's my first. I don't know if I'm going to go one by one, maybe.
Okay, let's yeah.
Aren't those 2 different worlds?
Well, I don't have any estimation results that can confirm this idea, but frankly speaking, we can, from these estimates, yeah, even from US dollar estimates, that is common exchange rate, which is used in 4 studies, we can see that the first author takes the time span 99-2004 and the highest exchange rate pass-through. Then the next, Beckman and Fiedmark, they use the longer time span until 2010, which gives lower exchange rate pass-through. Then Novikova and Volkov receive even lower exchange rate pass-through, and we actually confirm their estimates. Well, as I already told, I don't have any evidence of the decrease or time-varying exchange rate pass-through in Ukraine, but following some, again, theoretical assumptions that you can find in the literature, the shift from fixed to floating exchange rate and adoption of inflation targeting usually may be a result of lower exchange rate pass-through. Actually, Taylor in 2000 provided a very comprehensive and outstanding research on the adoption, how the adoption of inflation targeting actually lowered the exchange rate pass-through, because the nominal anchor of the economy is now not exchange rate as previously, but inflation. And anchoring the inflation expectations and shifting this anchor from exchange rate to inflation, yes, helps to avoid a high exchange rate pass-through. So we can only expect that the adoption of inflation targeting and shifting to the anchor from exchange rate to inflation will result in future in lowering of exchange rate pass-through. Yeah, so this can be assumption for future from the evidence from other countries, for example, from Czech Republic and other countries that adopted inflation targeting. Yeah.
Second question, so I will finish soon. Inflation last year and before that was obviously in Ukraine to a large degree result of pass-through, but as well of administrative price changes.
Yeah.
Have you taken this into account? You know, because when you assess exchange rate to inflation, you have different prices measurements. So if you can just
this was actually the idea of taking different price groups in order to avoid administratively regulated prices and other types of prices. So we can see here that in the results, well, the qualitative results, yes, they do not change whether we talk about consumer prices or other price indices. However, the quantitative results, they can be different. Yeah? So taking into account administratively regulated and raw food prices in the analysis, in some cases may lower the exchange rate pass-through, the estimation of exchange rate pass-through for total consumer price index. Yeah, here you can see that it's for consumer prices is 0.22, and for example for import tradables is 0.29. Yeah, so this can the estimation of the pass-through to total consumer prices may be actually undervaluated if we take into account these raw food prices. However, we don't take administratively regulated prices as a separate price group because, well, it has nothing, no theoretical or connection. Yeah, it's based only on decisions in some time point in time. So we don't provide any estimation on the administratively regulated prices.
Okay, and my last question is, if I got you right, when you spoke about different behavior of foreign exporters, by foreign exporters you mean foreign companies that that export to Ukraine.
Yeah.
And their price behavior. But have you taken into account what happens with the import component of domestic producers?
Yeah. Well,
this should be vice versa in terms of behavior.
Well, I don't think that that will change our resulting equation, because this is only one way that is used in empirical literature to actually derive this theoretical inflation equation. So some authors, they take just a second. Some authors take profit maximization problem of foreign exporter, and others take profit maximization of importer. And the resulting condition, first order condition, and all the assumptions that I already mentioned, they do not actually give any changes to the resulting equation. So this should be okay here. However, your question when that would be really interesting to capture the behavior of different sellers, yeah, or the price of the product of the good in the border and then in the supermarket. So in this case, empirical literature usually utilizes well, so-called VAR approach, when they take they study exchange rate pass-through within the distribution chain of pricing. So they take import prices, wholesaler prices, and the consumer prices. So, and they kind of capture this this chain of pricing in the country. Yeah. But however, in Ukraine we don't have well, good and long data or time series on import prices as a separate time series. So that's why we do not take it into account here, and we have to use only consumer prices that we have. However, in order to somehow capture this effect, we in our disaggregated consumer price groups, we define prices of import tradables. This is actually consumer prices that are sold in the supermarkets here in Ukraine, but the goods they can be imported or produced domestically, so they will have I don't know, the pricing to market theory will work the best for this type of group, and they will be much more sensitive from theoretical point of view, from exchange rate changes, which is actually confirmed by our results, that import tradables are much sensitive than our other groups. price groups. So we tried to capture all these ideas, but unfortunately we do not have enough data, informative data, to make the comprehensive analysis of this distribution chain of pricing and studying or examine the pass-through effect on the border and in the supermarket. However, I hope that in future research, when we got more data, we will capture this. Yeah, thank you. And this was the third, yeah, okay.
Off the hook.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Any other question? Oh.
First of all, thank you for interesting research and that you shared it with us. I would like to have to hear your ideas and comments about the practical use of this research in, let's say, economy of Ukraine. First idea which comes to my mind is that you have measured the effect of exchange rate in different types, for different types of goods.
Yeah.
Is the fact that, let's say, pass-through effect coefficient in some types of goods, let's say, larger than in others, means that in those types of goods, import dependence of Ukraine is higher, and maybe import substitution policy in these in some sectors, and these sectors may be more effective for economy.
Well, thank you for this question. This is a very interesting question. Well, I can say that from this research, from our results, we cannot have, well, we don't have evidence of what you are saying, yes? However, we are now trying to study exchange rate pass-through to different disaggregated, highly disaggregated price indices from the web scraping that is provided in the National Bank of Ukraine. When we actually have, we don't have price index, we actually have price of a good, yeah? And then we can say, studying the pass-through effect from this highly disaggregated data will help us to understand what goods are actually more sensitive or less sensitive. So this probably would give us much better evidence, and we can make some good conclusions on that. In this research, which is more kind of academic research, and the main goal was not to provide any policy paper or something for Ukraine. However, we can say that there are some arguments that the difference in exchange rate or price sensitivity to exchange rate shocks may be different for different price groups or for different goods. So, and we can study these issues in future. So.
We actually discussed with Alexander the future directions of this research, and that was one of the possible implementation to investigate how this pass-through effect for different types of goods depends on different characteristics of different markets. For example, you mentioned the openness and the openness to competition. Yeah, maybe the level of competition on different markets. That's also the reason very prominent factor which could influence the level of pass-through. Because again, Alexander started from theoretical explanation, and with theoretical explanation, and the main idea of the theory behind this research is that the level of pass-through depends very crucially on
market structure.
Market structure, yeah, and the power, competitive power of the exporting firm, or in our case,
importing. Yeah. So.
Maybe we have
Yeah, sure. Well, you can leave your email. I can send it to you. That's not a problem at all. Yeah. Yes, please. The green button in front.
Green button.
In front, yeah.
You said not to show more than 3%, 16%.
Yeah.
But how sensitive are your results to changes in this level?
Just to clarify, you mean changing the lower and upper band, yes? Well, we provide different estimates of with different threshold values, which is lower, higher of 3% and so on. But taking, well, how to say it correctly? The results, the lower band of medium changes you take, the results are more the same, yeah, because you capture these periods in both in small and upper cases, yes, and that's why 3 and 16% were actually one of the best threshold values that can actually that gives us actual different behavior or different sensitivity from small and large changes. So of course quantitatively, the pass-through effects may change a little bit if you take not 3 but 2% or 4%, but the main idea of this asymmetry or non-linearity from small and extremely large and medium are best captured when you take these threshold values.
Thank you very much for your interest again. So I hope you enjoyed the presentation, the research outputs. I would like to highlight once again that this research was very relevant for us, very interesting for us, because for a long period of time Ukraine was characterized either by very large exchange rate changes or by very small, by fixed step. Yeah, and maybe the results of this research explain why Ukrainian population is so sensitive to exchange rate movements. Because in past, all these movements very fast translated into the price changes. And we hope that the transition to inflation targeting regime will definitely moderate this pass-through effect and will help to ensure inflation expectations of households and other economic agents. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hope to see you during our next research centers.